In November 1970, after he was arrested along with others who engaged in a Boston protest at an army base to block soldiers from being sent to Vietnam, Howard Zinn flew to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore to debate the philosopher Charles Frankel on the topic of civil disobedience. He was actually supposed to appear that very day in court in connection with his arrest, and he faced a choice whether to go to the court or to go and practice his commitment to civil disobedience. Howard chose to go to Baltimore, and this is what he had to say that evening.
I start from the supposition that the world is topsy-turvy, that things are all wrong, that the wrong people are in jail and the wrong people are out of jail, that the wrong people are in power and the wrong people are out of power, that the wealth is distributed in this country and the world in such a way that not simply require small reform, but to require a drastic reallocation of wealth. I start from the supposition that we don't have to say too much about this, because all we have to do is think about the state of the world today and realize that things are all upside down. The men who are responsible for the My Lai massacre were not on trial. They are in Washington serving various functions, primary and subordinate, that have to do with the unleashing of massacres, which surprise them when they occur. At Kent State University, 4 students were killed by the National Guard and students were indicted. In every city in this country, when demonstrations take place, the protesters, whether they have demonstrated or not, whatever they have done, they are assaulted and clubbed by police, and then they are arrested for assaulting the police. All you have to do is read the Soledad letters of George Jackson, who was sentenced to 1 year to life. He served 10 for a $70 robbery of a filling station. And then there is the U.S. Senator who is alleged to have kept $185,000 a year, or something like that, on the oil depletion allowance. One is theft, one is legislation. So, you lose your perspective after a while. If you don't think, if you just listen to TV and read scholarly things, you actually think that things aren't so bad, or just the little things are wrong. So, we have to start from that supposition, that all things in the world are topsy-turvy. And our topic is topsy-turvy, civil disobedience. As soon as you say the topic is civil disobedience, you're saying our problem is civil disobedience. That is not our problem. Our problem is civil obedience. Our problem is the numbers of people all over the world who have obeyed the dictates of the leaders of their government and have gone to war, and millions of people have been killed because of this obedience. And our problem is that scene, from All Quiet on the Western Front, where the schoolboys march off dutifully in a line to war. Our problem is that people are obedient all over the world in the face of poverty and starvation and stupidity and war and cruelty. Our problem is that people are obedient while the jails are full of petty thieves, and all the while grand thieves are running this country. Yeah, that's our problem. We recognize this for Nazi Germany, right? We know that the problem there was obedience, that the people obeyed Hitler. People obeyed. That was wrong. They should have challenged. They should have resisted. If we were there, we would have showed them. Even in Stalin's Russia, we can understand that, right? People are obedient, all these herd-like people. But if we have learned anything in the past 10 years, it's that these lovely things about America were never lovely. We have been expansionists and aggressive and mean to other people from the beginning. We've been aggressive and mean to people in this country. And we've allocated the wealth of this country in a very unjust way. We've never had justice in the courts for black people, or poor people, or radicals. Well, that's our topic today. That's our problem, civil obedience. Law is very important. We're talking about obedience to law. Law, this marvelous invention of our modern times, which we attribute to Western civilization and we talk about so proudly. The rule of law has regularized and maximized the same injustice that existed before the rule of law. That's what the rule of law has done. Let us start looking at the rule of law realistically, not with that metaphysical complacency with which we always examined it before. We are asked, what if everyone disobeyed the law? But a better question is, what if everyone obeyed the law? And the answer to that question is much, much easier to come by because we have a lot of empirical evidence about what happens if everyone obeys the law, or even if most people obey the law. What happens is what has happened, what is happening. Why do people revere the law? There's nothing sacred about the law. Think of who makes the laws. The law is not made by God. The law is made by Strom Thurmond. If you have any notion about the sanctity and loveliness and reverence for the law, look at the legislators around the country who make the laws. All of this is done with such propriety as to fool us. That is the problem. In the old days, things were confused. You didn't know. Well, now you know. Now we go through the due process. Now the same things happen as happened before, except we've gone through the right procedures. In Boston, a policeman walked into a hospital ward and fired 5 times at a black man who snapped a towel at him and killed him. A hearing was held. The judge decided that the policeman was justified because if he didn't do it, he would lose the respect of his fellow officers. Well, that's what is known as due process. This guy didn't get away with it. We went through the proper procedures. He didn't get away with it because we went through the proper procedures. Everything was set up. The decorum and propriety of the law fools us. The nation then was founded on disrespect for the law. And then came the Constitution and the notion of stability, which Madison and Hamilton liked. But then we found in certain crucial times of our history that the legal framework, that did not suffice. And in order to end slavery, for instance, we had to go outside the legal framework. We had to go and do something at a time of the American Revolution or the Civil War. And in this time, which may be more critical than the Revolution or the Civil War, the problems are so horrendous as to require us to go outside the legal framework in order to make a statement, to resist, to begin to establish the kind of institutions and relationships which a decent society should have. No, not just tearing things down, but building things up. But even if you build things up that you were not supposed to build up, like you try to build up a people's park, that's not tearing down a system. You're building something up, but you're doing it illegally. So the militia comes and they drive you out. This is the form that civil disobedience is going to take more and more. People trying to build a new society in the midst of the old. But what about voting in elections? You've just voted. That's democracy. But even if you read what the political scientists say, although who can, about the voting process, you find that the voting process is a sham. Totalitarian states love voting. You get people to the polls and they register their approval. I mean, I know there's a difference. They have one party and we have 2 parties. We have one party more than they have, you see. What we're trying to do, I assume, is really to get back to the principles and aims and spirit of the Declaration of Independence. The spirit is resistance to illegitimate authority and to forces that deprive people of their life and their liberty and right to pursue happiness. And therefore, under these conditions, it urges the right to alter or abolish their current form of government, and the stress has been on abolish. But to establish the principles of the Declaration of Independence, we're going to need to go outside that law, to stop obeying the laws that demand killing, or that allocate wealth the way it has been done, or that put people in jail for petty technical offenses and keep other people out of jail for enormous crimes. People in all countries need the spirit of disobedience to the state, which is not a metaphysical thing, but a thing of force and wealth. And we need a declaration of interdependence among people in all countries of the world who are striving for the very same thing. Thanks, Howard.